Right, so.
Right.
Right, I'm going to talk to the audience that is not there a second.
Right, okay, cool. Sorry. Yeah, I do this, I'm afraid.
I'm glad. This is good YouTube stuff. I will encourage this.
Yes.
Right. Right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this strange corner of the internet known as the Adventures in Historyland YouTube channel. Today, I'm joined by Phillip Ball, who is an author and PhD candidate, student guy, and a guy I know from the internet, who is going to talk to me today about something that I think actually a lot of people will know of, but don't know of at the same time, because just pause for a second, clear your minds, think for a second. If you've ever heard the phrase, the grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. Sound familiar? Well, Phil here knows a lot about that, going up and down hills, and we're going to be talking about that today. Aren't we, Phil?
We are, yes. Right. Indeed we are, yes. The grand old Duke of York. I don't have very many nice things to say about the Grand Old Duke of York, unfortunately, which was picked up in a recent review. The reviewer said Ball has attacks the Duke of York with some relish, or words to that effect.
like General Jourdan.
Fair enough, I think.
As if you're a French general, you attacked.
Yeah, well, I'm of the opinion that the Duke of York's had a bit of an easy ride, because obviously he had a bad reputation, and so over the years, people have sort of scrambled to defend him and rehabilitate him. Say, no, he did a great job. And I'm kind of the opinion that he didn't.
Right. Okay. First question I had was and feel free to just say I have no idea, and we'll move on to something else. But because this is an edited show,
that's good.
The French objectives in the Revolutionary War are often posed by English authors as being driven by doctrine, i.e. we must now conquer Europe because we have just come up with this brilliant idea to kill all the royal family and stuff like that. Is this true, or was like the invasions that happened more of like offenses, like the best defense is a good offense?
It's massively highly politicized, obviously. Everything to do with the French Revolution is firstly massively complicated, secondly chaotic, and thirdly very, very politicized. So basically, they were making a bit of a hash of it in Paris, and they thought it'd be a really good idea to distract attention from the fact they were making a hash of it by declaring war on the two premium military powers of the age, i.e. Austria and Prussia, which they duly did, and they actually thought they were going to win. they were of the opinion that this was going to be a successful campaign. And they duly gathered up the awful rabble that they called it. Well, they had the remnants of the Royal Army, who were pretty reasonable, but a lot of their officers had gone and they'd been involved in revolutionary activity, so their discipline had slid a bit. They did still know how to shoulder a musket and march in the right direction. And there are also a whole range of these volunteers who, very enthusiastic, not very good. Hid a lot, ran away a lot, and later on they start conscripting people who basically deserted a lot. So they've got a not very reliable army, and they hand it over to a guy called Dumouriez and say, right, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to invade the Netherlands. It's like, well, we're not at war with the Netherlands yet. I shall invade Belgium then. So he invades Belgium, which is it's a fairly good bet for them, because Belgium at this point is called the Austrian Netherlands. It's run by the Austrians. The Belgians don't like it being run by the Austrians, and they're very they have a little war at some point to because they want to, after the French Revolution, there's a Belgian Revolution, but it gets crushed by the Austrians. So there's a lot of resentment towards imperial rule. And to be honest, the Austrians don't want them either. They'd far rather have Bavaria. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you would, wouldn't you? I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, it's closer.
It's closer to Austria for starters. Apparently we foisted it on them. They didn't want it in the first place, but we wanted to have this buffer zone between things we were interested in, and France, and we thought the best people would have that would be the Austrians because they got the biggest army. So we encouraged them to build on their sort of hereditary connection with what used to be the Duchy of Burgundy, and it became the Austrian Netherlands. So
I mean,
it's
like,
complicated already, isn't it?
Trying to create buffer zones is just what everybody seems to want to be doing. Because I gather the French were likewise trying to create a buffer zone so that nobody could just walk into France.
Yes. Well, they filled it with fortresses. A guy called Vauban built a sort of a network of interlocking fortresses, which made it somewhat difficult to walk into France. It's something they've tried a lot of times over the years. I mean, I don't know how effective it was. I mean, people say, "Oh, yes, that's why the 1794 campaign didn't get into France because of all these. They had to take all the fortresses." Like, they seemed to manage it okay in 1814, though, didn't they?
They did, and also Marlborough did it.
Yeah,
So...
well, they weren't there. They were still being built in.
Really? Well, I guess that's true.
Well,
I mean,
it's what is it? 16.
I
think it's the Vauban program goes from sort of the 1680s probably through to maybe it was done because there's the lines of
from Sartre.
There, you're not passing lines. Yeah.
And Marlborough said, "Yes, I am."
Yeah.
But that's a different war. Anyway, fortresses.
So the French they decide to in order to distract from their domestic turmoil to invade Belgium basically and declare war on Austria and Prussia, which goes well as you could predict. Really, not very. They move this rabble towards Belgium and goes fine until they meet some Austrian troops and then. They start losing, and the Austrians and the Prussians follow them back into France until we're quite close to Paris, and the French dig in at a place called Valmy, which is quite well known now, and the biggest non-event in history then occurs. The Battle of Valmy. It's not really a battle at all.
They call it the cannonade, don't they?
Because it's one of those things you think, if it could have all been over then, well, I wouldn't have a job, but it would have been a lot easier, wouldn't it? But unfortunately, the Prussians, they're quite a long way from Prussia. And because all the fortresses are French, they don't have much of a supply line. So they've been sort of trying to forage off the land, and they've done something like that. They had a lot of rotten fruit or something, or not unripe fruit, because they came through an area of orchards and they hadn't had enough food, so they all gorged themselves on unripe apples, and as a result, they all had dysentery. So
that might be the most French reason for something going wrong I've ever heard.
This is the Prussians.
I know, but it's not like the French idea. It's like this is such like bad food. Makes your tummy upset. Therefore, if you had only cooked it right.
So by the time Brunswick turns up at Valmy, his army's been dodging behind bushes for about a week, and they're not very happy. They're not very. They're all in a bit of a weakened state, and it's been peeing it down with rain. Carlyle, I think it is, says it was like the floods of Noah. It was biblical levels of rain, so it's all a bit muddy, and the Prussians turn up, and up until this point the French have just been mostly running away, and they're all on the hill, they're all dug in, and he looks at this lot and he goes, that's not going to happen, is it? Yeah. I'm not attacking that. My lads aren't up for it. We're going home. And after they have a few hours sort of exchanging gunfire. But and they call it the cannonade at Valmy. But it's because the ground's so wet that the cannonade, I think the casualties are microscopic, even by the standards of the 18th century. The number 6 is coming. I think it might have been more than that, but it was a very small amount of casualties. The Prussians accidentally managed to blow up one of the French ammunition wagons, and the French don't run away. And I think that's pretty much the set. This lot are more up for it than the usual run of the what we've been used to. So they go back to Prussia, and
Of
that's
course,
it.
the rule is if an arsenal, if a gun limber blows up, you all run away. Obviously, that's the
Yeah,
rule.
absolutely, yeah. And
And
they
weirdly
do
enough,
make it.
that's a thing. Actually, it actually does happen. Usually, like at Marengo, one of the Austrian like artillery wagon blew up, and it's part of the story of why the Austrians lost the battle and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Oh, it's quite well. It's a bit of a fright.
Mm.
Whoa, what's that? And B, your guns haven't got any ammunition
Yeah.
anymore, so your capability for responding has been diminished somewhat. So there's that as well. But off the back of this great triumph for the Republic, they decide that well, Austria and Prussia, they were easy. Let's declare war on the rest of Europe. So they declare war on the United Kingdom. Sorry, not the United Kingdom yet. On Great Britain, on the United Provinces, which is the Netherlands, and Spain. And then later on, Naples and Sardinia Piedmont get involved as well. I don't know whether they pile in or whether the French declare war on them as well, just for a laugh. So in 1793, the French declare war on us, and we decide to send in the Duke of York.
Of course you do, because that's the guy. That's your guy.
Obvious. I mean, it's one of those things. Think what? They scratch their head and they go, yeah, right. Yeah, he's what we need. It's like he's at this point he has no military experience. He's never commanded any troops in battle. Why they would think he was any good, I don't know. Because of the way the Netherlands works, it's a series of it's a load of provinces. Yeah. So they don't have a unified response, and they're all running around like headless chickens. And our ambassadors there are writing back on a daily basis saying, the French are coming and these people aren't doing anything. You know, there's nothing going on. Send us the Duke of York. And their idea is they're going to send the Duke of York.
Nobody says that.
He's going to take over the Dutch army. And obviously the Dutch aren't that. They don't really want that, strangely.
Yeah, nobody wants the Duke of York.
Why would he help? So they demand that we send some troops and ships, which we duly do. And I think the initial contingent was 3,000 men. So yeah, the French must have been terrified by this idea. 3,000 men.
Wow.
Steady on. That'll sort us.
Yeah, don't try and overawe. Don't try and overawe us too much, Britain.
Yes. Obviously, it's just it's the thin end of the wedge. It's the beginning of the build up.
Do you think that like they chose York partly because, I mean, Dumouriez and other early French victories like Jemappes and stuff like that, and the failure of the Prussians to finish the job at Valmy. Yeah. I mean, that's dispiriting, isn't it, for the coalition? So, do you think they threw the Duke of York, the commander in chief of the British Army, the son of the king, to sort of
he's not commander in chief yet?
Is he not?
No. Right. But yes, you're quite right. They send him precisely because he's the son of the king.
Right.
People have said, "Oh, yeah, why didn't they send so-and-so? Why didn't they send so?" It's all to do with senior. If you're in a coalition, especially in those days, being the son of the king, it pretty much trumps everything. Yeah. Your seniority is taken for granted.
Exactly, because he's also, his allies are the Dutch. Yeah. His direct allies are the Dutch and the Belgians and the Hanoverians, who are his men anyway.
Yeah. The Austrians. It's big with the Austrians. The Austrians are very pretty much everybody in the Austrian general staff is a prince of some description. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you send, I don't know, General Abercrombie or whatever, they're going to say, hello.
Yeah, he can't actually exactly. Yeah. He can't actually order them to do stuff.
Anywhere.
Indeed. Yeah.
So they send the Duke of York, and
So I mean, you were talking before about the mess of the French Revolutionary armies. Yeah. All right. So early questions here. Did they manage to organize them better for the coming campaign? for the French side, and the Duke of York is kind of famous as a kind of a kind of a reformer. He had been to the reason he went to Prussia was to because he had some ideas about the British Army and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's the British Army by comparison?
Um, it has been said by some observers at the time, even, that it's the worst British army that ever left the shores of Britain. So yes, obviously the first contingent is the Guards, so
Mhm.
they're pretty spiffy.
Mhm.
Uh, they were, they impressed everybody that saw them. Blah blah blah. The subsequent drafts on various regiments that the regiments who'd been thrown. I mean, they were raised in a lot of instances by a practice called crimping, which is they used agents to recruit, and these people were paid basically on bodies. The quality was irrelevant. Where they got them from was irrelevant. How they'd got them to sign up was irrelevant. They just turned up. There you go, 20 blokes. Right, I'll take the bounty for that. And so these were the kind of. I mean, they were described as pygmies and monkeys. I think someone talked of them as monkeys and Irish rascals, and all. They get a lot of bad press, even from their own officers.
Mhm.
I can't remember who it was now, but it's a guy that goes on to, but it might have been Paget, a
Mhm.
chap that goes on to be famous in the Napoleonic Wars. He was commander of an infantry regiment, and he
He
complained.
literally raised it, I believe.
Quite possibly, yes. This particular guy was talking at the end of the campaign. He was annoyed that three of his misshapen fellows, as he called them, had managed to survive, and he was hoping he could have replaced them with some finer looking chaps. But yeah, they weren't very impressed with the quality and the discipline of the British troops. Left quite a lot to be desired. I mean, normally, I mean, the diarists and whatnot are always at pains to point out that everybody else is worse.
Mhm.
And the things the Duke of York is doing to improve discipline, well, he does them a lot. And as a historian, it's always a sign if something's repeated that it didn't work the first time.
Mhm.
So there are through the campaign various points at which the Duke of York says, "Oh, I'm going to shoot you or hang the next person I find looting," or he threat. There's some business about camp followers. We've got all the camp followers, and that they obviously they're not subject to military discipline. So he tells them that they are, and that if any of them are caught stealing, he's going to shoot them and all this kind of stuff. But I think it carries on as far as I can see, and
Mhm.
our big one of the biggest battles in the campaign is the Battle of Tourcoing. It's a 2-day battle which ends with the British getting completely clattered, and it's probably one of the major defeats of the British Army in the period, uh, largely because we get stiffed by our allies who leave us to it. Oh, the Duke of York wants supporting, does he? This is the chap that thinks I'm an idiot, right? Yeah. Well, let me
I
say. Well,
got
we'll
no
see what else
appointments
we've got to
today.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spot of breakfast. Yeah. So basically, we get surrounded by the French, and casualties are surprisingly light, actually, considering the mess the tactical mess. I mean, like, almost completely surrounded, have to fight their way out through the back to the Austrian lines. So, and one of the things that slows down this fight out of the encirclement is our camp followers, the women of the camp, laden down with booty. And obviously, they're the wives and girlfriends of the soldiers, and they don't want them to be caught by the French cavalry who are chasing them along. So there's a lot of it's bad for the morale of the army, and basically, yeah, they're laden down with booty. So they've obviously been nicking stuff left, right, and centre, and there's a sort of outraged French account of how that they went into this particular village and all the house had been broken into and all the wine had been drunk, and the British, there was still some British in there and they're all drunk, and it's like, yeah, that's the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? Yeah. Poor old Belgium's been getting it from the beginning of the war right the way through to pretty much to 1815. It's they yeah, old Van Dam and his his division. They were rapacious. Even the other French complain about Van Damme. It's like, oh yeah, I just caught some hussars of whichever regiment it was and hung him. You can guess whose division they belong to. Yeah. And he sends back these lists of all the stuff that he's nicked. Oh, I took the bells from the town hall in here. I'm sending them back to Paris. I've got 4 million marks of silver I've taken from Ghent. I've been here. So yeah, he's nicking anything that's not tied down, and if it is tied down, he'll lever it off and nick it anyway. So yeah, so I thought it was a bit of
They're all at it. In other words, they're all at it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's positively encouraged. At this period, it's how they're paying for the war, basically.
Yes,
they're paying for the war by nicking stuff off the places they invade.
So the British Army is not in great shape. Certainly this one.
No, that was the original point. Sorry,
I have
wafted.
No, this is a good point. These were good points to be made. The British Army isn't in great shape, and it's fairly important to understand, I think, now at this period of time, that when you say the British Army, there's the British Army like at home, and then there's the British Army that is sent abroad as a field force. And that always depends on the commander-in-chief, how it is organized and how it operates.
Yes.
So again, that's at York's door.
Very much so.
Had the French done anything different to improve their army at this point?
No. If anything, it's got worse.
Okay.
They
think they're doing well, and they don't see a need to change it. Then, in other words,
well, they don't really have a lot of choice, really. I was talking in another podcast about the idea of a disposable army. They've got disposable generals and a disposable army. They're conscripting. They weren't getting enough for after the first lot of volunteers all ran off and went home and told the other people that war wasn't as much fun as they thought it was going to be. The recruitment dries up a bit, and when you've declared war on the rest of Europe, the one thing you don't want is your recruitment to dry up. So they introduce conscription, and they conscripting vast amount. It causes a civil war, basically. It's so unpopular, but they still manage to get 200,000 men a year to join up, which is quite a lot. But the quality is obviously very poor. I mean, they people go on about the great innovations of this period are living off the land. It's like, well, you've got to live off the land because you've got no commissariat, and there's no one going to feed you at all. They're not sufficiently organised. And the skirmishing. They always go on about the skirmishing. Oh yes, the clouds of they're not skirmishing. They just scatter. As soon as they scatter and hide behind stuff. And if they're going to carry on shooting, that's seen as yeah, you carry on. Oh, we're allowed to do this, are we? Right, okay. There are various accounts of some of the early battles where you've got officers. Well, there's a variety of qualities of officers. There are stories of officers removing their epaulets and stuffing them in their pockets as they run off with the rest of the regiments. And there are stories of more highly motivated officers sort of beating their men out of the ditches and behind to try and get them to line up like proper soldiers do, you know. So the French aren't a great quality either. I mean, to be fair to our lot, all the indiscipline occurs off the battlefield. It's all about upsetting our allies, basically. We're robbing the Belgians. We're robbing the Dutch. The Dutch are murdering us. You know, these are the people we're supposed to be protecting. So it's not good. But you line them up and you get them on the battlefield, and they fought pretty well. I can't think of any instances really where the British Army on the battlefield performed badly. I mean, we lost at Tourcoing, but never going to win that one. That was like I say, a stitch up. But they retreated fairly well, and there wasn't much considering this. If it had been the other way round, if it had been which it was supposed to be, that was the plan. They were supposed to be surrounding this cut-off large force of French and annihilating it. According to General Mack, anyway. But that didn't work out, and they turned the tables on us. I suspect it'd been the other way around.
This General Mack, He's
Oh
not the
yes,
guy who got completely trashed at Ulm, is he?
that's him. Yeah, that's
Oh
the fella.
dear.
He was called at the time the most scientific officer in Europe. So it's yeah,
Wow.
he had a lot of ideas. As they used to say about my essays when I was at school, great idea, badly executed.
Got it. All right. Well, that paints an excellent picture of the sort of armies we're dealing with here. I mean,
Yes,
I'm fascinated by the idea that the French, yeah, that I mean, it's a wonderful idea, to be honest, that all this sort of this stuff about living off the land was such an innovation. All the skirmishing was so brilliant. They could that it was basically the officers couldn't control their men.
absolutely. The living off the land thing, the French had done in the 17th century. It had been
Yeah, it's not
stamped
new.
out.
It's
It had
not
been
new.
no, yeah, they'd stopped it. They decided it was the worst thing that because if you send them out skirmishing or send them out foraging, half of them don't come back.
Yeah.
Or they might come back at some point. They might come back, but they'll be a bit worse for wear, or it was detrimental to discipline. And also, obviously, they're supposed to be exporting the ideas of the revolution. Uh, all they do is upset everybody.
Mhm.
Surprisingly, we upset people too. So it was
Well,
all
yeah.
like certain parts of Belgium were quite pleased to see the French, although they also claimed to be quite pleased to see us. So it was a bit. I think it was more a load of blokes turn up with guns. You tell them you're pleased to see them. Yay! Yeah. Who are this lot? Yay!
I think
we've been invaded again, or have we been liberated? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the Dutch and the Belgians were probably the best people in Europe at knowing how to deal with invading armies, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. They were very, very used to it. They called Flanders the cockpit of Europe. But yeah, so they'd had that kind of thing. So yeah, taking any. Oh yes, they were very pleased to see us, and it's like you read again, Van Damme turns up at the same place 2 days later. They were very pleased to see us. Yes, greeted as liberators. Like, yeah, but they greeted the British as liberators like 2 days before. So yeah, I wouldn't place much reliance on the response of civilian populations to the arrival of large
Yeah.
bands of armed men.
It's nice to write home about, though, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it makes you feel good. Oh, they like us here. Yeah. They like us here until we lose.
We must be the good guys.
Yeah, we're all right. Do you think they'll mind if we have this chicken?
I'm just going to take it anyway. But whatever. Strategy wise.
Yes.
Who's in command of the French forces at the second? Is it still Dumouriez?
Well, the French get through a lot of commanders. The first thing is there's lots of French armies. That's the first thing. There isn't just a French army. There's the army of the Nord. There's the army of the Moselle. There's the army of here. There's the army of there. And they change their names every 3 or 4 days, and they amalgamate bits with that bits, and they move bits from here to here. And the commanders, they as soon as once they execute the king in Paris and the Jacobins take over and the reign of terror really gets going, they make everybody sort of responsible for their actions. Makes them sound like civil servants. Basically, if you fail, they cut your head off. So there's a lot of French commanders not lasting very long.
You've heard of the sword of...
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Like, you heard of the sword of Damocles. Well, this is the... You've got a guillotine that's hanging over your head.
Nobody wants to be in charge anymore. They're like, oh, God, no, not me. No, him. He'd be better at it. No, not me. No. But, yeah, that's it's one of those things. They don't... And Dumouriez defects. He says in his memoirs that he was aware that, well, hence his decision to attack Belgium in the first place, and then back to his original plan of attacking the Netherlands. So having failed, he says that I had to do basically I've got to do something big. I have to. Whoa! It's got to be a gesture. I can't just hold my line here. We've got to go and invade someone. We've got to liberate them. We've got to go and fight the slaves of tyranny somewhere. So he's very much aware of the political sort of side of things, and when it goes badly, he's aware what the consequences are going to be. So he tries a coup. He thinks, I've got an army. They like me. Let's march on Paris. No, they don't like you that much. So I think I was trying to remember I was talking about this the other day. I think it's Davout is working is an officer in his army, and he stops this coup. And he goes to arrest Dumouriez, and Dumouriez realizes that all is lost, grabs his mates, gets on a horse, and next thing we know, he's turned up in the Austrian camp, which causes some trouble for them as well, actually, because they're in a bit of bother for having because his obviously when you declare you're going to have a coup, you have to have a bit of a manifesto, and his manifesto is to return the Bourbon monarchy. And nobody in the coalition, in spite of what people think about the French Revolutionary Wars, nobody in the coalition has actually said that yet. We've said we want to stop you doing this. We've said we think your country's a complete mess. But at no point has anybody said we're going to put the Bourbons back on the throne. We've said don't kill them. We said we'll be very angry. Well, that was the Brunswick Manifesto before Valmy. It's like you leave the royal family alone, or you'll be for it. But nobody said I'm going to put them back on the throne. And so Coburg, who's the Austrian commander, and Mack again, who've been treating with Dumouriez, are in a spot of bother for having signed up to this thing. So they get an official rap on the knuckles for that. That'd be naughty. Naughty! You're not supposed to do that. We have a political line, and you're diverging from it. Stop it. Just concentrate on taking fortresses. It'll be fine.
Would that actually bring that with all these many various French generals taking command? We'll just sort of watch for the changes then.
Yeah.
But what you said about fortresses,
to be honest, I can't follow them. I probably couldn't tell you who was in charge of any.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Houchard.
Yeah, I was going to say. Houchard was one of them.
There's a guy called Dampier briefly, who also doesn't do very well and decides to die at the head of his troops. Well, as well dying here and being remembered as a hero as getting on the hay wain and having your head chopped off in the Place de Concorde, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it's probably the thing to do. I mean, to be honest with you, if you're in the state like Houchard was, who was kind of on the back foot to be, and ended up dying dying like that, he might as well have just sort of got together like a do or die column and said, "Right, lads."
Yeah, it would have made everybody very, very happy. Well, the problem was he wouldn't do any of that. That's why they didn't like him. He was had various bits where he. Come on, we've been marching for all day. I want to rest my trip. No. There's no time to rest. You are the heroes of the revolution. You can't rest. We'll rest when all the tyrants are dead. It's like, oh god, that's going to take.
You know how many tyrants there are? Do you know that there are tyrants in Russia?
Yeah, we've got to get them next. Oh yeah.
There was a really nice segue into fortresses and strategy and stuff like that. The Duke of York is very interested in taking major fortresses.
Everybody is.
Yeah, and specifically, and obviously his end game seems to be more Dunkirk rather than Paris.
Dunkirk. Yes. Now, Dunkirk is a big, a large part of the British strategic story, shall we call it? The government decided that they wanted the Duke of York to take Dunkirk. I mean, the war was going quite well at this stage. We'd thrashed the French every time they turned up. They were pouring back over the borders. There were little pockets of them here and there, but 18th century warfare doesn't work like that. There were 4 days march from Paris, I think it was, and I'd have gone for it myself. But there's a lot of discussion in.
That's the 1814 approach.
Yes, well. I was reading only yesterday a letter from who? I think it was from Lord Loughborough to Lord Auckland, who is the ambassador in the Netherlands. And he said he wasn't sure what they should have done. He said he thought Charles XII of Sweden would have gone for it, but Frederick the Great of Prussia wouldn't have done. And so basically, the war's going very well. They're acting in a methodical fashion. The Austrians have gone to besiege. Can't remember where they went. they go to Malberge after that, but they went somewhere else between. Anyway, and we went off to Dunkirk, and the whole because it went badly. Everybody is sort of, it's all covering your positions, but it sounds like the intelligence was wrong in the first place. By all accounts, they could have if they'd have just gone straight there, they could pretty much have walked in, because they didn't realize, because Dunkirk had a reputation as a fortress. But at the end of the 7 Years' War, I think it was, it had been dismantled as part of and it was still hadn't been fully, they'd gone some way towards reconstructing the defences, but it wasn't fully defended. And York and his chief of sort of artillery and whatnot, his engine, I can't remember who it was. It's somebody famous. It might be Congreve. It's either, I think it might be. Anyway, one of the one
Wish
of.
I could help you. Don't know much about these campaigns.
One of the they think, oh, we've got a siege, because they've done Valenciennes. They did Valenciennes, and they did that.
I've actually seen one of the commemorative pots.
Oh, right.
That were made for that. The glazed pot with him taking the keys to the city, right? And on the other hand is a dragoon. It's in like it was in like a friend's, my grandfather's house, and they were using it to put. It had been broken and repaired, and they were using it to put wooden spoons in the kitchen.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, that's a nice thing to do. You're not going to get a drink out of it anymore, are you, if it's been all cracked and lovely. I'd love to have something like that. Yeah, but, yeah. But it's an interesting. So the Austrians basically ran it, because the British we hadn't conducted a siege in Europe since, I think, Namur in 1690 something. So
ourselves? You mean just by ourselves?
On our own, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, good grief, I have no idea when.
So the Austrians did it, although obviously we were there in the trenches. We did the digging and some of it, but they conducted the siege, and the British, as usual, were very rude about it. There were punch-ups in pubs between Austrian engineer officers and loudmouthed, opinionated British officers who thought, we could just wander in there tomorrow. Don't be stupid. So yeah. So there was a lot of bad feeling about that, but we'd taken Valenciennes, and I think perhaps they were excited by the idea of having their own siege. They've been given the instructions by the government. We want you to peel off now. And I don't know whether they wanted to downplay the amount of Austrian involvement or what, because the Austrians offered them a certain amount of troops, and they didn't take them. They took a few of them, but I think they only took like 9 battalions or something, which. And
you want the guns, you don't want the troops anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Might have even been less. It was a very small, and they might have even downgraded that. So by the time they turn up, it's almost an entirely British and Hanoverian force conducting the. And they marched off on the date they were told to. Turn up at Dunkirk. Nothing there. Well, where's the navy? Where's the guns? And he sent this huge list. I've seen it. This huge list of stuff that he wants to conduct the siege, and he's asked for everything. He's gone through the textbook, and he said, right, what do we need for a siege? Right, it's a fortress. Page 4. Right, I need. So he's ordered. He's got wood to build, because it's all sand around there, so you can't dig in. You have to dig up. So he has to build trenches, and he orders sandbags and crowbars and iron for this. He wants cannons. He wants these kind of carriages. He needs mortars. He wants ammunition. He even orders a couple of fire engines, I think. I think there was at least a fire engine, possibly 2 on the list, and pickaxes and spades. Anyway, when he turns up, none of it has arrived, largely because we don't have that much stuff. So when this has turned up at the Board of Ordnance, well, first of all, Richmond's gone, yeah, we'll get him that. And he's like, he wants what? We don't even have that. There aren't even that many artillerists in the whole British Army.
Yeah.
We don't have that many gunners.
It's not a big army anyway. We don't have a huge army.
Yeah. We don't have anything. So they're in Britain, they're all running around like headless chickens trying to get this list together, or at least part of it. And there's some confusion about the part of the Navy. Chatham is in charge of the Navy at this point, and he gets into a lot of trouble.
Hi, Jackie.
Yeah, hi, Jackie. He gets into a lot of trouble afterwards because they blame him for not sending. There is, as usual, it's more complicated than that. Firstly, nobody asks him to send anything, and then there's whole business about tides and blah blah blah. And there's a famous letter from from York's chief of staff saying, actually, we don't want the Navy. And people have gone, what? What do you mean you don't want the Navy? You're being because the French have got these swarms of gunboats and they're harassing the sea, because we carried on digging anyway, even though we didn't have anything to dig with or anything to put in them. So, but the besieging army gets attacked by these gunboats on an almost daily basis. Well, surely you need the Navy to deal with them. No, because the Navy don't have any gunboats. So I read a letter. Someone has found one. There's one in the yard at Chatham. You know, this will do. Yeah, I'm sure that one's going to really help, isn't it? Yeah. Basically, and everyone reads this thing saying, "Well, you don't want the Navy to help," and have used it to slag this fellow off. But if you turn the page over, which I don't think anybody had done until I found it, and read what's written on, he tells you exactly, because he said if the Navy get involved, they would have to come into sort of like into the port, but in order, if they were going to join in with the bombardment, they have to come in. And if they want to come in there, we've got to take that side of Dunkirk as well. And I don't have the troops to take that, and certainly don't have the troops to hold it. So if you could just send some gunboats, that would be all right. But of course, I don't have any gunboats. So yeah, and the Navy do turn up eventually, but they turn up the day after we've packed it in, because the Hanoverians are attacked at Honshoot, and they're forced to retreat, and they're the covering force for the siege. So once that's gone, the siege is over basically, and we have a bit of a messy and chaotic retreat. It's another one of those things where the Duke of York doesn't come out of it very well, I feel. Again, he does his best to defend his position, but there's a lot of people saying, we could at least have got the guns off. They've only just arrived. You know, these guns, he's been waiting for these guns. They've had to float them down the canals in barges. They've had to send out spies to find out which canals will take the barges that they need to send it. So they've turned up, they've assembled them. The siege is over. The guy that's in charge of the artillery does not want to leave them behind. But York's like, no, the French are coming, burn everything. They burn the tents, they leave the stuff behind. The French can't believe it when they turn up. They go, all this, they left the food, huge barrels of gunpowder everywhere. It's just sheer panic. And I don't think there's any evidence to show that he really needed to leg it at quite that. The army's under threat, but they're not they're not in immediate peril, I would have said.
Yeah, but since he can't bombard the place without the guns anyway, you'd think that he could have just turned the army around, fought a battle to redress the issue. And
exactly, yeah. There were surely other ways around it, but anyway, that Scarpa.
He Scarpas, right? Yeah, and it would be fair to say, therefore, that this distraction at Dunkirk has allowed the French to rally somewhat, because, as you said before, they were a little worried about the gaping hole in their frontier defences that had been caused by the fall of Valenciennes.
Yeah, and they've worked very much on morale, the French. You know, when they're up, they're up. When they're down, they're down. But they're very much encouraged by the defeat of the Hanoverians at Honshoot. They would say the English. We beat the English at Honshoot. There weren't any English troops at Honshoot. So I think there's a detachment of dismounted dragoons, but they're Hanoverians and Hessians. No English at all. But we're all by this point scattered, and it's taken the pressure off the French. You know, they're chuffed to bits, and they're able to go and send a force under Jourdan, made up of bits of. I think they're making a new army basically from bits of other armies and send it to relieve the siege of Maubeuge, which I've been to. It's very nice. It is and it isn't. The fortress is still there, so there's
Yeah.
still this great Vauban fortress, sort of basically plunked in the middle of a council estate. But it's
Vauban fortresses are very aesthetically pleasing.
they are. You can't beat them, can you? Really? They relieved Maubeuge. So yeah, Jourdan goes and he fights the Battle of Wattignies and upsets Coburg. It's another one of these things. I've said in another podcast that the Austrians seem to give up. They're very. It's almost like
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jimmy Chen on mockery of the Austrians.
No.
But he would agree with you.
No, well, I have a very high opinion of the Austrians militarily, but I think that it's almost like for them it's a game. It's almost like you're having a war game around your mates. You got your soldiers out. I'm not going to win this. Should we go for a curry? Yeah.
I mean, do people like York and Mack and Coburg and people like that is it true that they underestimate the French army? I mean, not that from what you've said, the French army has given them great reason to be anything to be scared of it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All they are is incredibly resilient, it appears.
They are. I think that's it. They just keep going. There's hordes of them. In the book, I talk of them as being like the Hydra. You cut, you destroy it. We've beaten them. They're all running. Oh, hang on. There's another, 40,000 of them there, and there's another 40. They've got several large armies. All of at no point do the French, I don't think, have an army in the field that's as small as York's contingent. The British army is all perpetually outnumbered, and as soon as they remove themselves from the protective bosom of the Austrians, they're pretty much they're done for. Really, again, man for man. In the battle, the British are superior. The Austrians are superior. The French are pretty rubbish, to be honest. I mean, they're getting slowly better as the war continues. But what they have on there is this resilience and numbers. They got disposable. I said it before. It's a disposable army. You don't care how many of them get killed. They're doing it for the revolution. Send them in there. Yeah, they. According to the British accounts, they die with "Vive la Nation" on their lips as they fold heroically to the ground. I don't know how true any of this is, but that's what the British are saying about them. So there's a high level of motivation, I think. They just keep. They don't stop. See, warfare, as I say, works to certain rules. You take fortresses. This happens here. They've turned our flanks. We shall retire now. So that's what the Austrians do. Yes. Well, we're not going to. Yes, we shall retire now. The French don't do that. They just keep fighting.
And of course, winter quarters.
Yeah, they don't go into winter quarters until you get to a point where you really can't move anymore. I mean, winter quarters is it's not just a sort of formality of warfare. It's a practical thing as well. You can't move. The roads aren't good enough in Europe to move horses, wagons, and artillery once it gets a bit wet. And but the French carry on for as long as they. I mean, there's a whole thing down in Alsace in I think it's 94 where the Austrians take Alsace basically with the Prussian assistance. They break through the lines of Wissembourg, which is this defensive line. They defeat the French. They take the towns, and yes, we've taken up. But the French are still there, and within a week they built a new army, and they're back and they're attacking again. And the Austrians and the Prussians just get fed up of it. It's just we've beaten them. That should be it. They should be gone. but it just carries on and on and on, and it's wearing to read it, it's wearing to write about it, and it was certainly wearing to try and fight against it, and it's relentless. And I think
Yeah.
that is the key to their success. Is just well, they don't really have any choice, do they?
No, no.
If they're going to preserve their and everybody who is organising this and sending this, their lives are on the line pretty much. They do not want this revolution to fail because they will die, and everything that they consider to have been worthwhile will be for nothing. So they've got to carry on, and they don't really have any choice. And it's the other side just haven't got that haven't grasped that new reality. I think is the key to it all. Yeah.
That sounds about right to me. I mean, how else really can you explain how the French can be kind of losing so many times and yet at the same time then just come back? And like with the Duke of York, he, like you say, he goes from taking massive fortresses and trying to take Dunkirk, to being hustled out of Europe. Yeah.
Because this war never works out how you expect it to. The whole Dunkirk thing that just ends it for 1793.
Yes, of course, yes.
They redraw the lines. So after this they redraw. It's pretty much back to square one.
Yeah.
Again, to use this game analogy, it's like, yeah, that game didn't go, so we're starting again. Let's start again from the beginning. So the Duke of York isn't falling apart at this point. It comes much later.
Yeah.
So, okay. I say much later. It comes at the end of 17.
Yeah, the next year.
They do 1793 again in 1794, but it goes more badly. Yeah. Austrian politics come to play a part in it. So there's
I was going to ask I was going to ask actually how the French turn this one around, because they obviously we got to Dunkirk. How do the French get the Duke of York to leave? How do they show him the door?
Well, another year of campaigning, basically. So when the campaigning season finally comes to an end, the French lick their wounds, consolidate the holds that they've made. You know, they've kept Dunkirk. They go out from they attack Ostend and Newport, causing a bit of bother there. We have to send. For me, it typifies the whole campaign, the British approach to it. First of all, the Duke of York doesn't seem that bothered that Van Damme is camped out round Newport and Ostend, and is this is basically where our supplies come in. The British Army was like, if we lose these ports, I don't know where he thinks he's going to go, but he's largely unconcerned about it. He sees an opportunity. He's seen an opportunity to attack a wing of the French army who are attacking the Austrians further down, and he's not paying any attention to what's going on up there at all. And the British go, oh God, the idiot, what's he doing? And the guy who's in charge in Ostend writes the government, says, ah! I'm surrounded. I've only got a couple of hundred men here.
Screaming noises.
Yeah. And of course, we haven't got an army. So it's like, well, we've got these fellas we were going to send to the West Indies. So they send Grey and a load of troops that he was supposed to be taking to the West Indies to capture Guadeloupe and Haiti and places like that. And they go and rescue the situation in Ostend. They get back on the boats, go back to the West Indies. It's like, oh God, it's real shoestring stuff. But it looks very positive. And with a great fanfare, Colonel Mack rejoins the army. They had him at the beginning of the war, and he fell out with some people, and he went back to Austria. But the British were very keen on him. They're very keen on Mack, and they've agitated to have him reinstated. And the Austrians sort of lacked a certain aggression and direction without him, to be fair. And so he comes back, and he's got all these great plans. And the French, like I said, have been consolidating their positions, but they haven't they've got various pockets of troops sort of stuck out in. There's some down on the River Sambre, and there's a load sort of in Flanders that are sort of in a quadrilateral position that's isolated from everybody else. And Mac thinks he can have them, and he draws up this huge plan. There's been a few battles already, and the Allies have got, the kicking ass. They've stuffed the French every time they've come across them. They're on the up. The morale is high. They've been fed. The British have had the winter partying it up in Ghent, and it's all going very well. And then Mac brings in this plan to destroy this pocket of under Suam. Now, I don't know if you've come across Suam.
No, I don't think I have.
He's a sort of, he serves throughout. He's right from the beginning of the revolution. He's still. I don't know what he does in the 100 Days campaign, but he's definitely there in 1814. He's sort of like
maybe I have. I would have to see it spelled.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. Anyway, he's the guy that drops the ball at Bautzen, one of those battles in 1813, 14. He says he's done a reconnaissance. He didn't bother. So he's probably a bit bored of fighting by that stage. He's been at it for nearly 20 years. So can be. But he's in charge. He's the guy that Carnot takes all the credit for this. The organizer of the rebellion. It's all about how you write it yourself, isn't it? He's the guy that gets the memoirs. He takes all credit for all decisions in this area, as he does at Wattignies and all the other. And it's probably not him at all, but his part is all about organisation and logistics.
Yeah,
very, very. But he wants all the glory. So all of Mac's plans that I've looked at, I've been studying Mac for this talk. So all of Mac's plans involve columns, diverging columns from everywhere, and all the British say, well, you've only got to look at it on a map to see that's never going to work. And he's done it several times and it hasn't worked. But in his defense, A, that's pretty much how Napoleon does it, and B, there isn't really any other way. You can't march them all on the same road, can you? No. If you're moving large bodies of troops, they have to move separately. The problem he always has is coordination and intelligence. He never actually, he thinks he knows where the French are. They never actually seem to, and he always expects them just to stand there and wait to be surrounded, and they don't.
This is an interesting topic, actually, because most of the time Napoleon didn't even know where the enemy was exactly. No. So it seems to be more a question of that the French are more dynamic in defense. I mean, you will tell me what goes on, but I'm suspicious it'll be because the French are more dynamic in their defense, and also the lack of interior lines.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff goes on. So and as you say, it's not unique to Mac. I mean, I've just been reading Gill's study of the 1809 campaign, and after the Battle of Teuenhausen, Napoleon turns up and he's got totally the wrong idea of which bit of the Austrian army he's looking at and which direction they're retreating in. And in fact, they're not even retreating; they're all off somewhere else. So it's not just Mac. Intelligence in this pit. It's like Wellington says, it's knowing what's on the other side of the hill. The only problem is both Mac and Napoleon think they do. And they use their superior intellect to work out where the enemy are, and they're quite often wrong. So anyway, this attack on this French position causes a great deal of confusion amongst the French initially. I mean, I go back to Van Damme a lot because his memoirs are published, and I've got them, so I've read them.
Yeah.
So he's got an interesting perspective on most things. He spends the whole of his first day, his division, it's a brigade. He's in charge of a brigade by this stage. Are marching a scent all over the place. They go, and in the end, he just says, "No, I'm not going any further. I'm staying here." And that's exactly where he needed to be, as it was. But the Austrians and the British and the Hanoverians and the Hessians and all these converging elements of the coalition army, they make a hash of everything. Archduke Charles is involved. His division has to march 17 miles. Somebody else only has to march 6 miles. You know, they're all moving at different paces, and whenever they get to a bridge, it all stops. And everywhere in Flanders, there's a bridge. You know, a guy called Clerfay, who the Duke of York is perpetually very rude about. He's bringing a large force coming down from the north. He's supposed to be meeting up with York. He hits a river. Turns out he's got a bridging train. Brilliant. But it's at the back of the column. Because it would be, wouldn't it? If you fight,
that's why you need a bridging train.
Yeah, you don't want them leading your vanguard, do you? But so it takes them most of the day to get this bridging train from the rear of the column down these narrow roads, swing it into place, cross the river. So that's him out. Archduke Charles, he's marching 10 miles further than anyone else, and in those days, the French march quickly, but no one else does.
And also 17 miles. That is like the upper limits of how far infantry can march in a day.
I wouldn't want to walk that.
Cavalry can do it.
Carrying a pack.
Cavalry can do it, but the infantry aren't going to be anywhere.
No, quite. Especially not in those days. They were good for 4 or 5 miles. You know? So he doesn't make it. Various other people don't make it. The Duke of York is the only one that hits his objective. He gets through. He again has to fight his way over a couple of defending bridge crossings, and his lads get into town, and it all gets a bit messy. There's a certain amount of looting and ungentlemanly behaviour. So he's out there, and they set fire to everything. That's the other thing. So the French know exactly where they are, because they can see the flames. Because this is Flanders; it's quite flat. They can see the flames from this church they've set up for miles around. So that's where the British are. We know where the Archduke Charles is, because we've got him bottled up on that river crossing there, and so they know where everyone is. So after a day of panic and we're being attacked from all quarters, they sit down with a map and say, right, they're there. Ooh. Oh, look, the British are in the middle. So at the Battle of Tourcoing, we get squatted. But even this terrible defeat makes almost no difference to the strategic position. they don't capitalise on it. They don't because there wasn't. It's just a reactive plan. It's not part of the strategy. Pishgru turns up, takes over the army, and then doesn't do anything. And everything goes back to square. So it's taking a while, and
that's another thing, of course. The problem when you keep switching generals is the general needs time to figure out where the army is, what it's doing, and all stuff that the guy who used to be there knew immediately. Where are you people telling me the truth? Who am I going to reorganize this, and I need that, and so there is an element of that. The biggest fallout from this battle is political. There is a suggestion that the Duke of York has been deliberately left to be swatted by Austrian commanders that don't like him. There's also a suggestion that Mack's plan has been deliberately undermined by the Austrian Chancellor Thugut, who is at that time suspiciously with the army, because the emperor has joined the army. Mack refuses to serve unless he's directly serving under the emperor, so the emperor comes and takes over the army. What?
Yes. What? Hey, what? Yeah.
The guy
not coming back. Well, basically, he left in the first place because he fell out with Coburg, and he's like, I'm not coming back. I don't want to be with him. He's nasty. I'm only coming if you're coming. So the emperor comes along, but Thugut doesn't want to be fighting in Flanders. He doesn't want Flanders. He doesn't want the Austrian. He wants again back to the old Austrian plan. He wants Bavaria, and he's far more interested in grabbing a chunk of Poland. He wants Galicia for Austria. So it has been suggested that he conspired with members of the Austrian general staff to ensure that this plan does not work, and it didn't. And there are a few more back that the Allies have more victories after this, but from there on in, the Austrians are becoming increasingly unenthusiastic about it, and because of the failure of his plan, Matt goes home. He makes some stab at flood. He wants to open the flood. The whole of sort of Flanders is flood ground. You open the sluices and you can flood it. So we'll inundate it. That the French won't be able to live off it. They won't be able to come at us from that end. We can concentrate on them over here. His plans thrown out. No, I'm not flooding my own country. Well, are you nuts? So they don't like you anyway. Well, I don't care. So they don't flood it. Mac goes home, and from there on in, the Austrians are somewhat more pedestrian and unenthusiastic about the war. And eventually, the two parts of the army slowly move apart, and various things. York gets an agreement to have all the British and Hanoverians and all the troops in British pay under his command, and he does that. But by that point, it's too late. It's not a big enough force to oppose any of the French. And when the Austrians withdraw, he's exposed on that flank. So he has to. From there on in, he's pulling back to a series of defensive lines on rivers, and he's back to his original, what he was sent there for in the first place, which was to defend the Netherlands. Only by this point, the Dutch are also massively disinterested in fighting anymore. There are the liberals in the Dutch society. They would quite like to be taken over by the French, or at the very least, they think they can have a republic on their terms if the French oust the House of Orange. And the House of Orange aren't massively well organised or sufficiently popular to mount an effective defence. So they're not really doing things, there starts to be scuffles between stragglers in the British Army and local people, and the camp followers again are causing trouble. And all in all, that's the point at which it all disintegrates. By Christmas of sort of 1794, we're camped by Nijmegen. It's an area for things to not go very well for British Army around there, really. And we evacuate Nijmegen and just slowly retreat, and that's it. And then York is recalled, and we have one of those famous harrowing retreats that the British Army seem to do so well, or badly, as the case may be. There's units fighting over billets for the night. There's people freezing to death by the. It's one of the coldest winters ever recorded, and things like people talk about their eyelashes freezing
because the rivers freeze up, so the French can just pour across to them.
Exactly, Pichegru just
ungentlemanly winter fighting and all sorts of this sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's talk some of the British diaries. There aren't many for this period, but they talk about seeing the French go out testing the ice.
That's not good.
God, they're coming.
I say, Harry.
Yeah.
What do you think they're doing?
What do you think those chaps are doing over there? Well, he seems to be jumping on the ice. No. Is he going through? No. Oh. So it gets to the point where it's so thick that they move cannons across it. And it was some bit where the Dutch had run away they'd abandoned one of their places, and the French used the planks that they'd used to get over the ice themselves. So they just swung them round, and a cavalry unit had just taken their saddles across and requisitioned horses from the Dutch, and we've got this cavalry operating. And it just, it's just from there on, it's all over, really.
Yeah.
And we made our way to Bremen and got on the ships and came home.
Yeah. And this is correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the campaign in which a certain Arthur Wellesley happens to comment that is this the campaign?
That's the one.
Yeah.
I didn't learn much except maybe how not to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes. Right. Anything else?
Well, I think that brings us to the termination point
Yeah.
of the core sort of theme of the video, which
Yeah.
is the Duke of York going up and down the hill. Why do you? So you began with saying that you're not a huge Duke of York fan, and you think he is to blame for a lot of the problems here. If
I
you
don't
want
think
to
he's to
just talk,
blame. I think
well,
that would
why
be an
don't you explain?
exaggeration.
Yeah, why don't you explain the what you think about the Duke of York in this campaign?
Okay. Well, I think as somebody pointed out the other day, the Duke of York is not in charge. He's not in control of anything except his British contingent. And as a general officer, he probably didn't think that things like checking the billets of your men, dealing with the commissariat and things like that were his responsibility. So he
I.e.,
doesn't
he's
see
not the Duke of Wellington.
he's not the Duke of Wellington. I mean, even the Duke of Wellington says, I mean, in his memoirs, in Rory Muir's
Yeah.
Path to Victory, there's a bit about he said that Wellington says they never the generals never came to visit us. We never saw anyone.
Hmm.
And if we had orders, if orders came from headquarters, they would just be tossed on a side table until we'll finish dinner. So it's not just Duke of this. This is endemic throughout the whole army. There's a lack of professionalism. And I think to point the finger at York and say yes, he was useless. I think he was just typical. I think is the thing. But subsequent people have said things like someone compared him to the Duke of Marlborough. And,
sorry. Sorry for the laughter. Carry on.
Yeah, and someone else compared him to Eisenhower in terms of his diplomatic skills. It's like, oh no, you're seriously having a laugh now. So there, I think I reacted in a way to things people have said about him I think he wasn't particularly bad. And as a field, it's hard to gauge him as a field commander because it's hard to know exactly which bits he did and which bits he didn't. Because obviously we've got his accounts of it, but they will have been written for an audience. It's like there's a particular a battle where there's a cavalry charge that he takes credit for spotting the opportunity for that cavalry charge and ordering it. I don't think he did at all. I think it was all down to a chap called Ott, who was an Austrian, a grizzled veteran of the 7 Years' War, a cavalry commander, the kind of person who would know exactly who happens to be with York at the time. So I think I think York takes credit for a lot of stuff that goes well that isn't anything to do with him, glosses over anything that is his fault. He blames everybody for everything. But I think on balance, he's probably just typical.
With that sort of summary of what was a fairly disastrous campaign, we'll put it this way, for the First Coalition, and the French are pretty pleased with themselves by the end of this, I think. And thank you for giving us such an entertaining sort of coverage of it.
I hope you get something out of that. I mean,
we will.
It was all a bit directionless, and I've shot off on various tangents and forgotten what I'm saying. It's very nice. I quite like this kind of thing. It's I don't get to go to the pub anymore, so it's like a pub conversation, isn't it? Only
that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for, Phil. This
channel. If you want to talk about the War of the Second Coalition at some point,
I'm gonna level with you. I know very little about these early campaigns, so I'm quite happy to.
No one does. That's why I got into it in the first place. That was the whole I saw a gap in the market. Well, I mean, I've been an enthusiast for the period. Ooh, well, put it like this: I read the Recollections of Rifleman Harris when I was 8, so quite a long time. And I worked at the Museum of the Leicestershire Regiment. And I was reading the regimental history, and I came across a reference to the Helder campaign, which it said, first of all, two battalions of the regiment fought side by side, which is very unusual. We invaded the Netherlands, and I've never heard of this, with the Russians. What? That was I was hooked from there, buddy. It's like, what is? So ever since then, I've been trying to, and I tried to find, but nobody's written about it. So I thought, you know what, I'll write about it. So I wrote about it, and I've decided. Although, so my first love is the Napoleonic era. I've definitely moved on to lady number two here. This is the French Revolutionary Wars.
There's a lot to love about the 18th century, to be honest, in terms of military history and things that nobody writes about.
The other thing is, I'm a war gamer. There's a lot of battles.
Oh yeah,
a lot of battles that no one's ever heard of, and so it's.
And it's a great collision of these scrappy Republican armies of
absolutely,
of like ragged volunteers and conscripts.
The stories. I've always loved stories as well. There's a lot of stories. I mean, from a political and strategic point of view, it's a mess. Such a headache. What is going on? It's so complicated. I mean, so I've dribbled off in so many tangents just talking about one thing this afternoon, and it's all like that. You know, I mean, I did the French Revolution for A level, and during my degree, I still couldn't tell you very much about it. It's the only things I know about it really are it's never how people think it was.
Yeah.
Everything you think you know about it is wrong.
I will take that. I will take that advice because I need to read. Honestly, I do need to read more about the French Revolution.
I think it informs your understanding of what comes next.
Yeah,
it all starts there. You know, it's pretty much all the commanders of the Napoleonic Wars fought in the French Revolutionary Wars. They cut their teeth in those battles. They learned what not to do. You know, and it wasn't just Wellington. It's all of them, really.
Well, absolutely. I mean, most of Napoleon's best generals were the guys who did well in the Revolutionary Wars. And like you said before about that other guy who was just kind of like who'd been fighting for 20 years and was just really tired. That can be said for a lot of Napoleon's generals as well, like Massena and things like that. And true, he had to go up against...
He's a classic example, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he's at the peak of his game in about 1800, 1805. You know, he's starting to. By the time he gets to the peninsula, he's on the slide really because he's been doing it for years. Yeah. It's the thing. It's a learning curve.
Yeah.
So learn. Oh, I know it all. Oh, I don't care anymore. Yeah.
And then, of course, the poor guy has to go up against Wellington. And it's just not what he's signed up for by that point in his life.
Not really, no. Really not.
But this, anyway, has been a really good conversation. Great chatting to you about this.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yes, very nice to meet you too. I think we should definitely do some more videos. And
absolutely happy to do it. As I'm very new to this process, but I found I quite talking about someone who wants me to talk about my favourite subject. You know, as you go to the pub, your mates are going, "Oh God, not this again." Oh Phil, yeah, very interesting. When's the book out? Yeah, have a pint.
Yeah, shut up, drink it down.
Shut up. Yeah, God.
Yeah,
I used to have some friends who used to call me boring but true.
Yeah, I have had some experience with that as well. Yeah, and you keep it bottled up.
Yes, but I've found in the last 5 or 6 years a group of enthusiastic people that share my passion for this subject with, and it's really nice to be able to get out and talk to you and meet some of you. You know, I've met. Dr. Writer, I met her through the internet, and we
legend.
We have a good chin wag from time to time, and Alex Stevenson and all those kind of people, Eamon, and all those people, lovely people. Nice to chat to them, and we don't always agree, but hey,
that makes it more interesting, doesn't it?
It does to me.
This, ladies and gentlemen, has been Phillip Ball. He is currently his current book, Neither Up Nor Down, which speaks to many of the things we have been talking today, is available now. Go buy it because I tell you to. I command you to do this, and I have power over over
It'll
over
make
the
Andrew
book.
Bamford very happy.
Indeed, over the book market. But please do that. He's also on Twitter. If you want to come in and join in with some of the fun conversations we all have through the weeks about history and things like that, links will be in the description box below. Because that's another thing that happens on YouTube. If you liked the video, please do the things that let me know that you liked it. I.e., if I have to spell it out for you, subscribe to the channel, press the notification button, leave a comment, and if it's a question about anything that we've rambled about today, then we'll try and answer it for you.
Yes.
And with that, once more, thank you to Phil for chatting. I hope to hope you'll come back. And as I encourage you every time I do one of these videos, ladies and gentlemen, have courage, have compassion, and Godspeed. And I will see you again the next time.